Thanks so much for having me a guest at your master level class. My name's Ron Sanderson. I'm the nationally published author of Parents Guide to Autism, Practical Advice, Biblical Wisdom, which became one of the top 5 best-selling Christian books on autism. My second book is Thought, Choice, Action, Decision Making that Releases the Power of the Holy Spirit, and it's on spiritual growth and St. Augustine. I'm also the founder of Spectrum Inclusion, which empowers young adults for employment and independence who are on the autism spectrum. I normally speak at over 70 events a year on autism, but due to COVID, I had over 40 events canceled in just 1 week. And today I'm going to speak on empowering children with autism and learning challenges to thrive. I'm going to begin by sharing my own testimony of being a child with autism. My development began normal. I said my first word, mommy, at 9 months. And what I like to share is that when I said my first word, mommy, at 9 months was when I was being water baptized. Any child who thinks they're going to be drowned is going to cry out, mommy, mommy. But I went through a time of regression after this, and 20% of all children with autism will go through a time of regression. I went from being able to say mommy to only mom, mom. And I went from being able to have perfect eye contact if I heard a sound like that to absolutely zero eye contact. And my mom knew there was something drastically different between me and my brother Chuck and Steve. She took me to a pediatrician. The pediatrician said, men are like fine wine. You got to give them time. That's good advice for women looking for a man, but it's bad advice for someone with a development delay like autism. Women are like flowers. They blossom quickly. And my mom knew that time was the essence. She immediately got me in intense speech therapy. I was in intense speech therapy all the way from age 2 to age 16. When I was age 7, my speech was so delayed, my brother Chuck would introduce me to people saying, you need to meet my brother Ron. I think he's from Norway because he speaks Norwegian. He'd have me speak and no one knew what I was saying, so I became an expert on Norwegian languages. When I was 7 years old, I began kindergarten. And my development was so delayed, my communication delayed, and social interaction, that the school specialists and education department was going to label me emotionally impaired. My mom said it's not emotional, it's neurological. And if you can't tell me what's going on in my son's head, I'll get him tested and come back to you in the fall and tell you exactly what it is. In 1982 at Henry Ford Hospital, I was diagnosed with autism. In 1982, only 1 in every 10,000 children in the U.S. was diagnosed with autism. Now it's 1 in every 59 children and 1 in every 37 males. When the teachers and school experts heard autism, they said if your son has autism, he'll never read beyond a 7th grade level. He'll never attend college. He'll never have meaningful relationships, and he won't excel in sports. And my mom was determined to prove the experts wrong. She quit her job as a full-time art teacher and became a full-time Ron teacher. And with her help and her love and acceptance and professionals' hard work and dedication and God's grace, I was able to graduate from college with bachelor's degrees in psychology and theology and a 3.9 grade point average from Oral Roberts University. I went on to get my Master of Divinity from Oral Roberts with a perfect 4.0 grade point average. I got married December 7th, which is, for you history buffs, the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. And having autism, I came in like a kamikaze, a whirlwind of fire. And then on March 20th, 2016, my daughter, Mikhail Marie, was born. And none of this would have been possible except for my parents and professionals working with me. And today I'm going to share the 8 ways you can empower your child or student with autism and learning challenges to thrive. And these are the ones my mom used in my own life to develop those gifts, to develop those talents. First, you got to keep hope alive. Only 3% of young adults with autism are gainfully employed. Only 9% of people with autism get married. And many people with autism will struggle throughout their whole life with underemployment, unemployment, with lack of friendships, with isolation, with depression, and all this creates a hopeless complex. The hopeless complex was discovered in 1967 by Dr. Martin at the University of Pennsylvania. He was doing a test on dogs using electricity, which by our standard today would be highly controversial. He had 3 groups of dogs. Group A of dogs, he'd give them a shock on the right side, they moved to the left. Group B group of dogs, he'd give them a shock on the left side and they moved to the right. But Group C, no matter how many times he gave them a shock of electricity, they just stay in one place and whimper and refuse to move. They had developed hopelessness. And Dr. Martin shared with his colleague, Dr. Mayer, I don't understand Group C of dogs. I know all dogs go to heaven, but Group C is going to get there a lot quicker with the amount of electricity I'm using on them. Dr. Mayer said to his colleague, well, what side are you giving him a shock on? He goes, well, I'm giving him a shock on the right side to move the left. And he said, the problem is yesterday I gave him a shock on the left side to move to the right. They feel hopeless. They've learned a hopeless complex. No matter what they do, they're not going to be able to succeed. And many times with delays in development, delays in social interaction, delays in having a career, people with autism have the same hopeless complex. Every milestone and major event in my life took me longer than my peers and brothers to accomplish. I was 20 years old when I graduated from high school. People wanted me to wait 1 more year so I could be the designated buyer. I was 35 years old before I had a long-term relationship. 36 when I moved out of my parents' house, so there's still hope for your child moving out. I was 37 when I got married, 41 when I became a father, 42 for my first nationally published book, 43 for my second book, and I'll be 45 years old when Kriegel publishes my 3rd book, Views from the Spectrum. And all these delays also caused me to feel hopeless at times. Dylan Vaughn, author of Bad Choice and Make Good Stories, describes the autism hopeless complex in his life this way. My life is such a minefield of failures. No matter how hard I try, and I try really hard, I can't keep a job, I can't keep a girl, I can't even keep track of belongings for God's sakes. Even with my perpetual optimism, everything in life tends to go wrong, and more wrong than I ever thought it could be. I feel like my optimistic nature is being slowly and painfully eroded by my increasing soul-crushing life experiences. And that describes the autism complex best, soul-crushing. Maslow's pyramid describes man's needs in life. It begins with basic needs, food and water, and the top need is self-actualization. But without a hope complex, you can never realize your full potential. And the way you create a hope complex in young adults with autism is sharing success stories of people who were able to accomplish great things. People like Temple Grandin, people like Clay Marzo, a pro surfer, Tarko, the pro baseball player, Armani Williams, a NASCAR driver, and share that although it's taking you longer, those gifts, those talents, when they're refined, will become beautiful gifts. And focus on the strengths, not the weaknesses. The areas people are weak in autism will probably always stay valued. But those areas where they're strong, those mountains, you can make them stronger and you can compensate for the areas where they're weaker with autism. Dr. Tony Atwater said 80% of people with autism suffer from high depression and anxiety. And I know throughout my own life, I've suffered many years of depression, anxiety, and part of having a hope complex is self-efficiency. The belief that if I set about to accomplish a goal, I'm going to be able to accomplish that goal. And when you feel like you're able to accomplish something in life, it makes you get up in the morning with hope. It makes you get up in the morning believing that life can change and that good things can come your way, and that you can develop those friendships, that you can learn those skills to be able to be gainfully employed. Deborah Rubber, whose son has Asperger's, wrote, "I'm convinced that the greatest gift we can give our differently wired kids is a knowledge of who they are, how their brains work, and what they need to do to create the life they want. See, that's hope. Hope means that when I set about to accomplish something, I'm able to accomplish it. Because when we guide our children along the path of self-discovery, they can feel good about themselves, develop self-advocacy skills, and ultimately grow up to be self-realized adults. That's Maslow's triangle. Being able to realize what you want to accomplish and knowing the goals and abilities to accomplish that. And that's basically the hope complex in a nutshell. It's being able to know what you want to accomplish, knowing that you have the ability and the support to accomplish it, and going about to accomplish those goals. A healthy self-efficiency is key to overcoming hopelessness. Self-efficiency is a person's belief in their ability to execute the actions necessary to achieve desired outcomes. And I take it even one step further, to achieve dreams. Many times people who feel like they've been beaten down in life lose even the desire to set about to accomplish a goal because they feel like Eeyore. It's all as black as just before complete and utter blackness. They feel like it's hopeless, but there's always hope. Julie Hornet, whose daughter Lizzie has autism, says, "Love your child exactly as she is." We often think we need to fix our children with autism, but in actuality we need to learn how their minds work and use their strengths to help them become the best version of themselves. Also keep a marathon mindset. As parents, we want to do everything possible to help our children, but we ourselves burn out. When we forget to take care of ourselves, our kids can feel our stress, slow down, and remember, the little steps of progress will add up. And that's hope not only for your children, but hope for you. That as I set apart raising my child, working with my child, there's going to be progress. And ultimately, you have to commit your child to God. 1 Timothy 1:1 says, Jesus Christ is our hope. So without Christ, there is no hope. And when you commit your child to God, you get them involved in therapy, you keep a positive attitude, and you never stop trying new things. You never know what therapy, what program will bring the most growth in your child's life. And pray for the Holy Spirit to lead you and guide you to the best program, to the best therapist, to the best teachers who will help your child. All these are key to helping a hope complex, not only in your child, but also in you. Number 2, focus on abilities and refining talents. And my mom didn't focus in on my weaknesses. She focused in on my talents. She noticed I had a great ability to memorize vast amounts of information. I have over 15,000 Bible verses memorized, including 22 books of the New Testament. And in college, I got to mentor under Dr. Jack Van Impe, who just passed away January 18th of this year. In special education, there's too much emphasis placed on the deficit and not enough on the strength. And that's Temple Grandin. I got to present with Temple Grandin at Metro Parenting about 3 years ago. And one of the things her mom always did was looked at her strength. She loved animals. She loved cattle. And looked at those and helped her develop a career around where her strengths were rather than where those weaknesses were. My mom believed in autism refined, not cured. She was inspired by Proverbs 22:29. Do you see a man skilled in his labor? He was served before kings. He was not served before obscure men. And when I began kindergarten in 1982, she noticed that special education had a 2-teacher rule. You had one teacher at the front of the room, one at the back. The one at the front made sure you didn't make an exit through the front door, and the one in the back made sure you didn't dart out the back door. And my mom said, you're not educating students, you're babysitting students. And if my son's in your class, the best he's going to be is doing his bagging groceries. The best he's ever going to be is a bellboy holding doors open or washing dishes. But he has great talents, great abilities, and he's going to serve before kings and not obscure men. I'm going to refine those gifts. Autism isn't like a cold or the flu or COVID-19. I can't cough on you and you have the autism flu. But autism can be refined. First, I'm going to talk about autism unrefined. Autism unrefined looks like this. You're walking on the hot black pavement going to the beach in your bare feet. I know the beaches are closed right now, but just use your imagination with me. As you're walking along, all of a sudden, you feel something sharp. You go down, you pick it up. It's a piece of glass. Someone was having Miller time. Now you're having Technic shot time. It's jagged, it's rugged. Autism unrefined for me was zero ability to filter what I'd say. If a thought came into my mind, I'd spew it out like Trump using his emails, Twitter account. Autism unrefined for me was very little ability to control my emotions. Most kids are like bottled water. They may get shaken up, stirred up. I was more like Mountain Dew. I got shaken up, stirred up, kaboom. Anyone want to do the do? But autism refined, on the other hand, looks like this. You're off that hot black pavement. You're walking along Lake Michigan. You're walking along the ocean. You feel that good breeze. And all of a sudden, as you're walking, you feel something against your foot. You go down, you pick it up. It's a piece of glass, only it was refined by something greater than itself. It was refined by speech therapy, occupational therapy, ABA therapy. It was refined by the grace of God. And now that piece of glass is smooth. You put it on your neck, is jewelry. You put it on a wall, is art. And my mom was determined to take those great gifts, those great talents, and refine them so I'd serve before kings and not obscure men. Daniel 6:3 says, now Daniel so distinguished himself by his unique gifts that the king set him before all his leadership. And my mom knew I had unique gifts, and if they could be refined, I'd be doing amazing things for the kingdom of God. And that's has been the case with my life. Dr. Karen Clark, who I present with quite a bit, she's a professor at Oakland University, said it this way: I don't want to turn an autistic person into a non-autistic person. I want to help an autistic person who struggles become an autistic person who does not struggle as much. And that's what my mom was determined to do with me, also like Dr. Clark was determined to do with her son with Asperger's. So my mom looked at the ways I was weak. She found ways for me to compensate and helped me to learn in ways that I was able to learn. Phonetically, I'm unable to learn anything. But my mom knew I had a great memory ability. So when I took Spanish class, I failed because it was taught phonetically. But when I took Koine Greek, which is a dead language and is taught using flashcards, I was able to get a 4.0 A's every time and be able to translate 2/3 of New Testament from Koine Greek into English. So knowing those areas where we're strong, knowing the areas where we're weak, and knowing how to use our strength to compensate for our weaknesses is key with autism. Number 3, you got to be creative in teaching. And I mentioned earlier, my mom saw I had great visual ability, but no phonetic ability. When I'd write my name, when I was 5 years old, I'd write it backwards. So I had dyslexia also in addition to autism. So she'd have me draw pictures, and then she'd have me tell her a story. She'd write down the story, have me rewrite it, and then the stories would go along with the art. Within 2 years of having dyslexia, using visual learning, using art, I went from having dyslexia to no dyslexia. I still have dysgraphia, horrible handwriting, but we all have our faults. And in the movie Fierce Love and Art, which is narrated by Temple Grandin and produced by Dr. Lawrence A. Becker, they share my story of overcoming autism and learning challenges through art. My mom also noticed I had very little ability for social interaction. So what she did for this to help me out is she used my love of animals. She'd send me in the mail letters from Cheddar the squirrel. Here's one of the letters that she wrote me in 1981. Cheddar is a beautiful, or Busty Tail is a beautiful squirrel. She's very peaceful. She's a great listener. Notice also too, in the letter, listen is underlined. We on the autism spectrum have a horrible time being able to listen at times. She also used my love of prairie dogs. My mascot is a prairie dog. My other mascot is a honey badger. Prairie Pup was instrumental for me learning social skills along with the Cheddar the Squirrel letters. When I was in 3rd grade, my mom got me Prairie Pup, and from age 7 all the way to age 16, there was me, there was Prairie Pup. And it helped me be able to develop skills. Girls would make Prairie Pup outfits. One girl made them a jean jacket. One made them an astronaut outfit, and this helped me interact. Dr. Lavas, the founder of ABA Therapy, said it this way: if they can't learn the way we teach the way they learn. So my mom knew I could learn through squirrels. She knew I could learn through prairie dogs and honey badgers and animals. So she taught me in ways that connected with me. And autism is unique that we have these unique special interests. Parts of trains rather than whole trains. Pokemon or video games. And when I was in 4th grade, my teacher, Miss Melanie, had me enter the Detroit Edison poster contest. And I did a drawing of Prairie Pup. And Detroit Edison was famous at the time for having commercials with Isaiah Thomas. And Isaiah Thomas would say, look up. And the kid says, Isaiah, I don't see anything. He said, good, there's no electrical wires. So for my poster, I drew Prairie Pup working on building a fort near electrical wires. And it says, and one of the squirrels who he's working with is about to hit a transmitter with a hammer. Well, Prairie Pup's leading the way of building the fort. And it says, look up. You don't want to become a furry fried friend. And my poster won 1st place. And for the grand prize, I got to meet Isaiah Thomas, the all-time leading scorer and assist player on the Detroit Pistons, also a Hall of Famer. And my mom did this. She used creative ways. Teachers use creative methods to help me to learn. And by learning with these creative methods, I was able to develop. My honey badger, as you can see, he's social distancing. He has his mask on. If you're out there, if a honey badger can wear a mask, I'm sure you can wear a mask also. Thank God that when I was in 8th grade and Prairie Pup became the first animal, prairie dog, that was expelled from a public high school. Thank God my interest wasn't a honey badger, because a honey badger doesn't give up. They wouldn't have been able to expel this bad beast from high school. I got my first honey badger, which is one of my mascots, on my honeymoon in Chicago. I looked in the window, saw the honey badger, he growled at me, I growled back. It was love at first sight. But the first one I had, if you pressed its paw, every F-bomb in the book would come out. I don't use him when I present because I don't want him to go off and people think I'm having a live demonstration of a meltdown. So I got on Amazon this little bad boy, and he's declawed. Sometimes the most brilliant minds in intelligence do not shine in standardized tests because they do not have standardized minds. And this quote is important because many people with autism, like myself, do horrible on standardized tests like the SAT, the ACD. I just interviewed a young adult who got their law degree and they bombed the SAT. They bombed the ACT. And in fact, I bombed the SAT, bombed the ACT. The Miller test, I was so mad I wanted a Miller beer when I got done with it for graduate school. And I was reminded of this quote 3 years ago. One of my close friends in college got his PhD from Duke in history, and he had a job interview at Oakland University for a professor job, full time. And when we met, he said, there's one reason I have a PhD and you don't. You got higher grades than me. You have nationally published books. You have hundreds of published articles, more than I have. But the difference is is I do good on standardized tests, you fail. And he had it perfectly outlined. And you think about, there's another word for standardized tests. It's called a general test. We on the spectrum, we know in the DSM-5 that we have a difficult time generalizing ideas. And standard tests aren't based on knowledge, but recognition. In autism, you don't have that software to recognition. You don't have that phonetic software. You have visual ability that's out of this world. But when it comes to phonetics and generalizing ideas, it's very low, which makes you do bad on standardized tests, which holds back many people with autism from being able to accomplish their dreams of getting a PhD. And instead of having standardized tests based on all different fields, when we know that an expert now is someone who knows less and less about more and more, we need standardized tests that are based on that subject. So if I'm getting my PhD in biblical studies, my generalized test is on biblical studies, which would make it much easier for people on the spectrum. I like this old story I heard about generalization in autism. Dad and mom are teaching their child about cats. Mom takes the kid to the zoo and points out a lion and says, "This is a cat." She points out a tiger and says, "This is a cat." He goes to his ABA therapy. The teacher draws a cat and says, "A cat's an animal with whiskers and a tail." That night, the dad's taking the son out for a walk. He sees a black cat and he says, "There's a cat." Then he sees an old woman hitting on a young man. He says, "There's a cougar, son." And that's, with autism, hard to understand because you're doing an abstract idea. And that's why we do often bad on standardized tests. Always look to the child to set the pace for learning. Look for signs of frustration, fatigue, and being overwhelmed. And with this point, when you're working with your child to learn something, give them an easy task, move up to a harder task, and then move back again to an easier task. This will cause the frustration, the fatigue, and being overwhelmed to go down. If you allow your child to make the speed, they'll be much more receptive to you, and you'll help them enjoy learning with you. So don't overwhelm a child with autism when you're teaching them. And this is advice from special education teacher Rachel Summers. Number 4, decode the meaning behind the behavior. As I mentioned, with sensory issues like I have, a lot of things can make me go off. If I smell bleach, it will make my sensory issues give me a headache or even a meltdown. When I was in college, one time a guy below me was playing 2 Live Crew. Boom, boom, boom. And it made me go off. I went running down the stairs in my tighty-whitey underwear, and it took an RA holding me back from beating up a big guy, 6'6", even though I was only 6'1", I was scrawny, 140-pound autistic kid. But that's how behavior can affect us with sensory issues. If I eat a popsicle and there was fish on top of the popsicle when it was in the refrigerator, even if the fish was gone for 2 weeks, I can still taste the fish on it. If my wife's using nail polish, I can smell that nail polish and it will get me very anxious, very angry, and very upset. But decoding the meaning behind it, it's not bad behavior, it's sensory issues. And that's important. I call my meltdown my honey badger moments. Even normal kids will have their behavioral moments. Michaela, when she went to Grandma's house 2 years ago in Florida, she found the mascara and got all over herself. And I have a beautiful picture of Michaela with mascara on with that innocent look. She just wanted to play with the makeup, not realizing it'd make a mess. Behavior is affected by motivation, attitude, and self-image. Remember, that goes back to number 1, hope. So if we can create hope, we can create motivation, we can create an attitude that's positive and believes it's able to go, and self-image of hope. Motivation thrives where there's love and acceptance. So accept your child for who they are. Accept them for the gifts that God's given them and the talents, but also at the same time help them refine those gifts, as I mentioned earlier. A child's behavior is like an iceberg. You see the top. You see the kid acting out or screaming or throwing or breaking something. But that could be because of things underneath the iceberg which you can't see. Sensory issues. There's a flickering light. It's making the kid go up. There's a smell of bleach the kid doesn't like. There's that boom, boom, boom bass they can hear in the background that makes them their sensory override. Over 80% of the nervous system is involved in processing or organizing sensory input, and thus the brain is primarily a sensory processing machine. When our brain efficiently processes sensations, we respond automatically with adaptive responses that help us master our environment. Adaptive responses are actions or thoughts that help us meet new challenges and learn new lessons. So if you can get an environment where their sensories are not being override, the child's going to be able to learn in that environment. And if you're creative in that environment and the child's able to learn, they're going to develop new gifts. They're going to develop an ability to process that information in a way that they're able to create actions that are going to help them develop life skills and develop abilities to interact socially better. My favorite sensory issue story, an embarrassing moment with my sensory issues, happened when I was in 3rd grade. My mom took me to a Cub Scout event, and they had a red-nosed clown with red hair and a lamb puppet on his hand. This clown knew nothing about autism and would quickly, in front of an audience of 200 people, become an expert on autism. He thought it'd be funny to take the hat off my head and put it on this kid's head and put it back on my head. From the sensation of the clown taking the hat off my head, putting it on that kid's head, I had a meltdown. I grabbed that lamb puppet and proceeded to beat the living snot out of the clown. The red nose went, and I went flying out of there. I never became a Cub Scout. I never got the badge of the badger or even the eagle, although I flew like an eagle. And the Cub Scout leaders told my parents, if your son would do that to a clown, we don't know what he'd do to our kids. I was the first person officially kicked out of the Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts of America group. Thanks a lot, guys. The more you praise your kid for what they are doing right, the less you have to criticize and discipline them for doing wrong. That's because praise becomes a motivator for proper behavior. So I want to encourage you, if your kid's dealing with sensory issues, if they're dealing with behavioral issues, praise them for the things they're doing right. Praise them for the things that they're producing in their lives that are going to help them later on in life. Look at the fruit. Don't look at the bad things, behaviors, but work in those areas that help them improve in those areas. Number 5, don't allow labels to limit your child. A lot of times with autism, people will label the child who has autism, and this limits them from reaching their full potential. I have a picture here, and it's a young man in a wheelchair, and an older man is asking him, so what do you prefer to be called? Handicapped, disabled, or physically challenged? And the man in the wheelchair says it this way, Joe would be fine. And the caption for this comic is, the most appropriate label is usually the one someone's parents gave them. So don't label people as handicapped or autistic, but look at the areas they're struggling. Look at the areas where you're able to help them develop those areas and help them strengthen those areas and become strong in those areas. Kayleen George, whose son has autism, shares, knowing someone's functioning label doesn't help you to know anything specific about them except for their ability to verbally speak. So it doesn't really help the mom at the park, the grocery store clerk, or the substitute teacher to really understand the autistic person that they're trying to understand. It's much more helpful to talk about an autistic person's individual strengths and struggles. They will give you a lot more helpful information than an arbitrary label given by a specialist, someone who's maybe spent 2 hours with the autistic person total. Also, people who are considered lower functioning are often not given the same opportunities that other people are given. People hear their label and they almost give up before they're even given a shot.
Okay, we gotta stop.